Hi everyone, welcome to the second episode of Uncertainty is Possibility. I'm Jasmine, a psychotherapist and coach, and what I really love to do is to guide people in creating better worlds and love their lives while doing it. This episode is titled, You Know What to Do? Why Can't You Start? Today, I'm going to share something very personal, something I've been actively applying in my own life, especially in those moments when the next step feels uncertain, but I really want to take it. And I think this one is going to land if you have been sitting on something for a while, something you want to do, to start, to create, and somehow you just haven't been able to get the first step moving. So like maybe you've been wanting to leave your job, but the leap feels too big. Or maybe there's a project, a business, a creative thing that you have been circling for months or even years. Maybe you don't even know exactly what the next thing is. You just know something right now is not working well, something needs to shift, but the not knowing keeps you stuck. This episode is about what I've come to understand as one of the biggest invisible barriers to stepping into possibility. And it's something I've wrestled with for most of my life and sometimes even up to today. And this is perfectionism. For those of you who already know me, I am a recovering perfectionist. And for most of my life, I haven't been able to put something out or even start something until I deem it perfect, or at the very least, very good. And I know my standards are high, so even just getting to that point takes a really long time, and it is also a very stressful process for me. And also, what that created over the years is this image of me as someone who is very put together. And that's actually a comment I receive a lot. And every time I hear someone telling me that I look very put together, I kind of get it, but there's also this little voice at the back of my mind going, do I really want to appear this way to people? Because when people see me as put together, and I used to see this as a compliment, but not anymore now, I feel like I have to live up to that image. So the cycle continues. I put in a lot of effort. I produce something polished. People say, wow, that's amazing, that's great. And then I feel even more pressure to keep producing things that look polished, and it's so exhausting. So one of the analogies that come to mind, it's not really an analogy because it actually happens, is to me, right? It happens to me when people are coming to visit my house, and then like an hour before, I'll start frantically tidying it. So these people, my friends or acquaintances, they walk in, they look around and they say, wow, you're so neat. But actually, when no one is visiting, my house, or at least my room, my personal space, can actually be quite messy. I am a clean person, but not a very neat one. So my things don't always go back to where they came from. Like I have a lounge chair beside my table now, and I'm just looking at it, and it's just piled up with notebooks, my jacket, a random pillow. So that's how it is on a random day, not when someone visits. And I realize that's exactly what perfectionism does. It is like the frantic tidying up before the guests arrive, and what people see is a curated version, not the actual living space, not the mess where real life happens. So even when they say something kind, like, your house is so neat, this is so well done, this is amazing, there is a part of me that knows they're not seeing the real thing. And that gap between what they are seeing and what's real and that I know to be real, it's quite lonely. And there will be always a part of me that can't fully receive the compliment because the person complimenting me doesn't actually know what's underneath. And I am saying this not based on the house visiting analogy, because I that is a different thing altogether. That is just to illustrate the point. And so this frantic tidying up is what I've been doing for years, to put out something that people see as perfect, as curated, and they compliment me for. Yeah, I used to do this for everything I put out in the world, but not anymore. Because at some point, I started to want something different. I wanted people to see me as who I actually am, and not the result of me putting in so much effort to look put together. Because if people only ever see the polished version of me, I will never truly feel seen, and that's very lonely. There's also something else underneath perfectionism that I think is worth naming, and it connects directly to what this podcast is about. When we try to perfect something before we put it out, or before we even start something, a lot of the times it's because we want to control the outcome. We want a good response. We want to know what's going to happen. And that uncertainty of not knowing how people will receive it, whether it will be enough, whether we will be enough, can feel really threatening. So let's just think about this example of someone who's been wanting to leave their job for years because they know something isn't right. They can feel it. But they can't take the step because the next step is too uncertain. And some of the things that might be running through their minds is, what if the next thing doesn't work out? What if I'm not as capable as I think outside of this environment where I am currently in? Or what if people see me try and fail, and maybe I have to return to the job, my original job? So a lot of times when these thoughts come, these people, they end up staying. They wait until they land a perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect safety net. And the waiting becomes its own kind of trap, because perfect X, perfect Y, perfect Z often always does not happen. Well, the stars may align and you could get really lucky, but most of the time it doesn't. And they might say that I am waiting for something that is perfect. I don't want to settle. Yes, in some cases, it is about not wanting to settle. That there is a very fine line here. But if we see this as someone enacting perfectionism, I'm not sure if you could say that. In this context, it isn't really about high standards. It is about trying to eliminate the risk of being seen in an uncertain, unfinished, and not as perfect state, wanting to control the outcome so that everything feels like it's gonna go well and smoothly. And to just give a personal example as well, when I was a teacher in a secondary school, I saw this so clearly in myself, especially before formal observations where my bosses would come in and watch me teach. So before these observations, I would plan my lessons down to the finest detail, like if X happens, I'm gonna respond Y. And it's not just one of these if X then Y. I have like so many of them. Like if a student asks this, I say that, and knowing some of my students who are gonna act out, especially when my bosses are in the classroom, I'll say, oh, if John does this, I'm gonna respond with Y. This is the punishment I'm gonna give, or something like that. So I would really plan all these things, and there was no room for anything outside the plan, because anything outside the plan was uncertain, and that felt so scary. But the thing is, when you leave no room for uncertainty, there is also no room for flexibility. And when something unexpected happens, and it always does, especially in a formal observation, you don't know how to respond. I was like frozen for so many times because I've never practiced responding to the unknown. And when we talk about possibility, real possibility, it actually lives in a space where things aren't fully controlled yet. And perfectionism at its core is a way of trying to close that space down before we even step into it. So nowadays, I very intentionally try to do things differently when I catch myself trying to perfect something before I put it out. That is when I know this is my indication to just put it out. Find some way, find a smaller step to just get it out. And the most recent example of this for me is this podcast. The old version of me would have wanted to control everything, to have a proper intro, outro music, those polished, professional sounding podcasts that are on the other podcasts, but not mine. And I know myself well enough to know that if I had tried to do those things, this podcast would not exist. You wouldn't be listening to this right now. It would just be existing in my head. So I just made an intentional decision to strip all of these away. So no intro, no outro, no music. I just pick up my mic and I just talk. Because actually none of those things are important to what I'm actually creating and what I really want to share, which is connection through just honestly talking about things. The music wouldn't change, make or break anything. And reflecting on this process, I feel like it really comes from self-knowledge. It is about knowing what holds me back and then removing those things. And I told myself I can always add them later. Maybe in episode 20 you will hear some music, but maybe you wouldn't for the rest of however this podcast is gonna live. And in any case, I don't need any of these to start. So that's how I woke up one day with an idea and I just got it out in the same day. There is no launch process. I just press record and I figure the rest out after. So if there is something you've been sitting on, something you want to do, something you want to start to create or to step into, here's what I'd like to invite you to try. So just pick up your pen and paper and write down everything you think you need before you can do, create, or start this thing. All the steps, all the requirements, all the things your brain is saying are necessary. And then sit down and have an honest look at this list. Which of these things can you take away? Which are truly essential? And which are there because you are trying or wanting to control how people will receive it or what they will think of you or how they will respond to you. So, and then you just start the process of stripping it back. So just start to cancel things that you feel like you can take away until you get to something that feels like, okay, I can do this. And this is your starting point. Now, if you look at that list and you feel like nothing can be removed, you are still stuck with almost the same list that you first came up with. Just sit with that for a moment and really, really honestly ask yourself, is it that all these things are truly necessary? Or is it that you don't feel comfortable leaving any part of it to chance and to uncertainty? If it is the latter, what I am sensing might be underneath is a lack of self-trust. And that is something worth exploring. And this is not a criticism. It's just an invitation to look a little more closely at the circumstances around what may be stopping you from taking that first step. There is something that I also want to name here because I think this often gets missed. Sometimes when we talk about taking the first step, it is not about sharing what you create. Sometimes it's really just about making that thing exist. And exist can come in a spectrum, right? Like exist can be like sharing it with the world. Exist can be just writing it out in your private journal. So if putting something out in the world feels too big right now, that's perfectly okay. The step might be record the episode of the podcast but don't post it yet, write the piece that you've been wanting to write but don't publish it, draft the resignation letter but don't send it, apply for the thing even if you're not sure you'll say yes or they'll say yes, right? So just let it exist in a form that feels safe for you first. The form of it is really important because sometimes it is what we think the form should be that holds us back. And the question I find really helpful here is, what feels safe in my body right now? Right now. Just to give an example, I did this with a piece of writing about my grandmother and her death and how I feel about it. It is still something that is very tender for me. And when I wrote it, I didn't feel ready to share it with the people closest to me. I know it is odd. Oddly, I felt okay with strangers reading it. I think it's because it's still so tender for me. When people who know me, who know my grandmother, who knows our relationship read it, they might come and have a conversation with me about it. And at that time when I wrote that article, it was just not a conversation I was ready to have with anyone. So because I was okay with strangers reading it, and I really want to express myself at that point, I just put it on my Substack, which I don't actively promote. You can find my Substack, but I don't really talk about it, not yet at least. So I just let it exist there in a space that felt safe. So that question, what feels safe right now, is worth checking in with yourself very regularly, and you will notice that the answer will change. So for example, now I'm probably ready to let what I wrote about my grandma exist on my Instagram, although I haven't done it yet, but I feel safe right now. I didn't feel safe then. So asking yourself this question and hearing your honest answer is gonna help you find the right sized step to start. It is not a step that is so small that nothing moves at all and everything is still in your brain, but it's also not so large that you freeze and not do anything. A lot of my decisions nowadays are guided by two questions. The first is, what challenges me? And the second one is, what keeps me safe in my body? I don't believe personally that a life without challenge is a life fully lived. But I also don't want to challenge myself to a point where I feel so threatened that I freeze and I don't get anything done at all. Uncertainty is where the possibility lives, and that's what this podcast is about. But getting ourselves to actually step into that uncertainty, that's where the inner work is. And perfectionism is one of the things that keeps so many of us standing at the edge. We're just looking in and we're not stepping through. So whatever it is you've been sitting on, I just want to say this clearly. It is something that guides me and I want to share it with you. And that is, you don't have to be ready. You just have to begin. You just have to find the right size step and go. Imperfectly, incompletely, in whatever form that feels safe right now. And if you want to walk through any of these more intentionally, I work with people one-on-one as a psychotherapist, and I also run a coaching program called Presence. Presence is a 4-month coaching journey where we work on exactly these things, which is to build the capacity to hold discomfort, deepen self-trust, and create the life you actually want without sacrificing your well-being to do it. And all the details are in the show notes if you are curious. And if you just want to say hi or share what's been sitting with you, please comment wherever you're listening to this or DM me on Instagram. I reply to all my DMs. And that's all for today. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.